Sasa hii umewekea nini? Unaona nini?
Ndio nini?
Au umeweka hiyo back.
Nataka kutafuta ka music. Fanya hivi. Kauliza kwa miaka ngapi? Kauliza kwa miaka ngapi?
Unjui? Unjui?
Naona namjua.
Kizalio Rozi.
Kama na kipi? Amekalia na kipi?
Amekaa huko. Kitu kulingana na wale watu wako hapa.
Sasa sioni kama wanaanza tu.
Unaona wanafaa kuwa wanamaliza saa hizi. Ama alikuwa anangojea watu wengine wakuje kwenye kupeana speech. Ale Kayolo box nilikuwa naambia challenge yake ni nini?
Challenge
ama ni bet?
Ukipata nini kanakuja na betri yake, so uta connect. Hata
betri yake ni type gani?
Betri unajua niliona kana operate na OS. So what you do, unakuja tu na nini power bank, kama uko na power bank. Ukienda mahali kuko remote ni the best kutumia.
Unaisunda tu pale haraka haraka.
But huku kwingine
anafikiri inakuja already na YouTube ndani.
Iko na kila kitu. Una login.
Good morning. I just wanted to let you know we're starting at 8:15, so I'm just giving you a little time to settle in. Thank you so much.
Mtu angana embed nataka kuandika jina ya mtu unaweza fanyia
kunayo
but kuna version mbili, kuna pro
pro iko nayo, hii nyingine haina. Mbona pro iko nayo but pro iko nayo lakini hiyo nyingine haina. Yanafaa umwambie ukifika nini niambie.
much for joining us this morning. My name is Nasra. I am the CEO and ESG lead at the Kenya Green Building Society. And I'm really grateful to see familiar faces and not so familiar faces, and I'm hoping, if nothing else, after this event, we'll all be friends and learn a thing or two from each other. So without further ado, what I would like to get on with is the program, of course. I'll do a quick summary of what we will be doing this morning and then jump into my speech for the morning. So we're going to have 3 sections for the program. The first is the keynote speeches and setting the tone. The second part will be the panel discussions, which will be led by Gikon Kitonga and Alex Devereaux. And then we'll close down with the winding down section, where we'll capture our commitments or the way forward in terms of what we feel we'll achieve for today and going forward. So thank you so much. And I'm hoping we'll not keep you too long. I know you're busy, but thank you so much. All right. So as you might be aware, the way we do business has changed. Investors are now very, very keen, not just on making money, but how we also make the money. It is against this backdrop, therefore, we need to be alert, aware, and constantly impactful in how we do business and how we also run our organizations. Closely tied to that, we, as Kenya, have an extremely important role and opportunity this year because we have been named the Climate Change Champions for Africa. We also have the leading position in the African Union. That means then our voice in Africa is powerful. Lastly, and more importantly, COP27 this year is going to be in Africa. So, against the things that I've just said, I want you to keep in mind that ESG, or environmental, social, and governance, or known in full, is a tool that I see which will help us as the market address certain gaps that we have and then connect the dots to make the best of the opportunities before us. So what's the opportunity before us? We have the opportunity not just to be profit-making entities. We have the opportunity to help Kenya with its Paris Agreement commitments, to be a strong voice as not just profit-making entities, but change makers that impact not just Kenya, but Africa, and of course, the wider world. Now that I've said that, what is our plan? My plan for today is to do 3 things. The first is to utilize ESG as a tool that brings us together. And for that, I have a framework and an action plan for how we will do that. Before you see TSRRA. This is how I think we should approach ESG and how then we will connect the dots to reaping the opportunities and eventually maximizing the benefits. Together, I'm hoping that we can take the market collectively and you individually in your respective industries to say to the market that as players who are keen contributing, not just financially, but from an impact perspective, this is what we need to do to get ESG right in Kenya. The first T is training. You can't talk about reporting, you can't talk about investment if you don't even understand what ESG is. As KGBS, we would like to start by saying it's important for us to start with the first letter, training, which comes from the understanding that it's important to build capacity through an awareness perspective. So we make people aware of what ESG is within our organizations, with our clients, with our partners, and it is through building this capacity and eventually training, we can then go to the next step, which is support. Now that you know what ESG is, now that you know what it means for you as a business, you can then decide what you feel is your position currently and what you need to do for the next step. Enters the second letter, support. This is why the professional services firms are in the room. As KGBS, we are an ecosystem enabler. We enable important conversations in the market, but we need your help. We need professional services firms to assist by supporting businesses and industries identify where they are and where they need to go, so that they can then push the needle in reaping maximum opportunities and minimizing risk. Once we finalize on that, we go into the R, which is reporting. You know where you are, you've identified where you need to go. That is what then takes you to building up what you need to do on a reporting perspective. You can't report on what you don't know. As KGBS, we are the industry partners for GRESB. We will also come up with a short list of a framework which we feel would be useful for the market, having consulted regulators and industry. But we don't want to do this alone. We want to work with you. Once you've reported, the next R is review. It's important for us to realize that how ESG would be translated in Kenya might slightly differ to how it translates in the global wider world. So once we've finished reporting, we need to come back to the drawing board and say what works for us and what doesn't. That's why we've used that. And lastly, we need to recognize that once companies have made these efforts, we need to recognize them by awarding them for these efforts. And in this regard, KGBS will do the ESG annual awards program, where we will recognize and support and endorse people who are actually making efforts and strides to make the most of the impact. Now that's done, what's my next step and final step? So I'm reaching out to you all to say, I've told you what I think should be the action plan. I've told you what I think we could do together for each step. I would want us to come together to drive that action plan forward, whether you're a professional services firms provider, financier, or industry. Think about how you can play a part in driving this forward. All of you are leaders in your own right. So I would like you to ask yourselves what you can do to drive this agenda forward. And in doing that, it's not going to be at the expense of profits. Our problem as KGBS is we have investors. What we don't have is companies showing the initiatives to convince investors that they're going in the right direction. So if we connect those dots, and I'm hoping you walk with us, I think we can achieve it. And if we achieve it, and this is my vision, we get ESG right in Kenya, we become the pilot of getting ESG right in Kenya, and we lead that conversation in Africa so that it is replicated in every country in Africa. All of you are leaders, so why can't you become the leaders to drive that agenda in the continent? And with COP in the horizon, I want us to show up at COP saying this is what Kenya has done. And all of you will be part of that conversation. Thank you. I guess I got too excited. I laughed. I was really happy to be done. So on that basis, thank you so much. I would like to invite Professor Khaled Miberi, Urban Planning Advisor from the State Department of Housing and Urban Development, to say a few words. Thank you, Prof.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm standing here in my capacity as the representative of the PS State Department for Housing and Urban Development. That is Mr. Charles Ndomaola. I've been sent here to represent him, so I will make a few comments. But I also want to say that I'm also a professor at Kenyatta University. I'm also in the built environment as a planner. I'm also in the built environment as a lead EI expert. So I have a lot of experience. I just want to say that it's a great opportunity for us as professionals to come together. And from the ministry point of view, we have what we call a policy and legislative obligation as captured in our urban development policy and housing policy, among others. We also have other players. So what I would want to say from the government perspective is that the government is ready to work with all players to drive sustainable development agenda as captured in our constitution and in our various policies and legislation. I want to point out that when you talk about the green building society, you are a very big role to play. And given what our constitution says, we must involve various stakeholders. So the government is ready and is committed to work with you to promote the building agenda that we are talking about. I must say that for me, having been part of the reform agenda for the last 25 years or so, it has not been very easy. But I can see in this room champions. When I see young people, I see champions. They must then be ready to drive this agenda. What I want to also reiterate is that when you talk about climate change, some of you may not be aware where it's going to begin. This thing began with the Industrial Revolution around 1775. Now we are feeling the impact. Everybody's complaining. But when we talk about the professionals in the built environment, we have clear roles to play. In fact, we are to blame for all this mess. Let's be honest with ourselves. The professionals in the built environment have to be blamed partly for the problems we are facing. Similarly, they also have a role to play to address these issues. And going forward, I just want to point out, I've been given 2 more minutes, but let me just finish, because these are very critical things. You as a society, I'm sure I see students doing research in this field, there's very little knowledge about the green building concept, principles, their applications, their place in our legislations. You have a role to play to ensure that the green building concepts, design, applications are mainstreamed in our systems. And you must start with what you said first. Let us retool our professionals. Retooling becomes very critical. Most of the studies that we have seen is that most of our people, most of our professionals are not aware of the concepts. They are not aware of the principles. They are not aware of the applications. So you need to take a leading role in doing that. We need to see how you can create what we call the labs. The labs where people can go. We have a few green buildings in this country or in this city, but you can't visit them. Our students who are doing this research, they can't access the building. So how do you play a role in creating labs similar to what we have seen like now in Singapore, in Brazil, where you have labs where children who are 5 years old can get to play and see how do we roll this out. I'm just finishing. The other key point that we need to drive is research agenda. And the private sector, all of the other players should work with the government to drive this agenda. And last but not least, the new government is coming. Can we push the reform agenda so that we mainstream all these processes in our policy and legislative framework, and going forward as we move towards COP27, let us live to our expectations as the champion on climate change. And let us leave the talk. We have this challenge of having too many documents, but implementation becomes a challenge. And you have the task, as per what you have said, to drive this agenda. And the message I want to take back to the government is that we are ready to work with you as a government and as a university. We want to be at the center of this. If you look at this room, we have research institutions, we have professors, who are involved in this area, so that we all work together. To me, I think together we are stronger and we will be able to deliver on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. I really appreciate it. Up next, I'd like to invite Chris Kumanga, Director of Energy, County Government of Laikipia. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen,
I'll start by saying sustainability is not an inconvenience. So people may look at sustainability and think, I'm used to doing things in a certain way. And so changing it and doing things a different way just because of sustainability will be an inconvenience for me. So take, for example, the human body. An apple a day is much better than 6 apples on Sunday. And this is not a personal attack. A glass of wine every day is better than 3 bottles on Sunday or Saturday. So it may look like a big feat, changing the norm and starting something else. And for Laikipia County government, we appreciate that resources are not infinite. We have limited resources, and so as we do our development, our operation, our agenda, we should have our resources in mind, and we should understand that if we don't exploit them in a sustainable way, then we'll just have a robust business environment, but no natural environment. In Laikipia County, 46% of our county GDP comes from agriculture. And if we don't nurture the natural environment, then we lose it. We cannot even do manufacturing because that is based on agriculture and so on and so forth. Take, for example, we have a good agenda towards manufacturing. We are supporting about 1,300 enterprises, and we have given them an economic stimulus fund so that they shift from what they're doing into manufacturing. We want to do a lot of infrastructure. We want to do affordable housing. We want to push the mining agenda. But without sustainability, then all this investment will be in vain. What is Laikipia County currently doing? So we have solar pumps for our boreholes and for irrigation. This provides water for agriculture and other uses. We are using solar lighting to light up our towns, and this extends business hours so people can add to their incomes. We are sorting waste at the dump site so that enterprises can pick what they need at the dump site, and that brings about a circular economy. We are also supporting investments towards green generation of energy, such as a 40 megawatt solar project in Mumuruti. We also signed an MOU with Kenya Green Building Society, and the MOU really should help Laikipia County. We've made some measures, but assist Laikipia County do better, because everything good can be made better. So what is the MOU about? We are doing training of county staff, as Prof has rightly put it. If you don't train our professionals, then as government, you won't be the path towards sustainable development. So we're training county staff on green buildings and egg certification. We are supporting local enterprises who are in the green space by training, by certifying their products, by supporting them and connecting them to markets. We are also doing a zero carbon building accelerator program. And the program will take stock of all the buildings, both residential, commercial, industrial, public infrastructure such as hospitals and schools. And by taking stock of our buildings, we'll know how are we utilizing our materials, our energy, our water. And by knowing where we are, we can know where to improve in. And also, we can see medium, short, and long-term, low-lying fruits, as we like to put it. So it's not an inconvenience. Sustainability is not an inconvenience. It may look like a lot of work for now, but by engaging stakeholders such as yourselves and seeing the role each of us can play, I believe it's an agenda that is quite achievable. And as government, we are ready and we are willing to incorporate ESG in our reporting, in our operations, in our development and investment. So that is all for me. And today is Friday. I hope you'll have your one glass of wine.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it. Up next, I'd like to invite Mohammed Hassan, who's a Senior Environment Officer He's a senior environment officer from the Kenya Ports Authority, all the way from Mombasa. Thank you so much, Mombasa. Please welcome.
Good morning. Once again, my name is Mohammed. I'm affiliated with the I am presenting the head of corporate governance. Thank you very much, GPS, for inviting us to this forum. It's a very important session for us in the process. And when I look at the programs and initiatives of Kenya 2027, it is in line with our efforts and our attempt to make the port of Mombasa green. This is a journey we started some years back, way back in 2015, but the discussion started in 2006. And we started by developing a green port policy for the port of Mombasa. A policy that focuses on emission reduction, a policy that focuses on use of renewable energy by the port infrastructure, and a policy that recognizes the importance of engaging stakeholders and port users towards making the port of Mombasa green. We started with making some of the buildings green through partnership with SEPA South Africa. And we started with many workshops that had the asbestos leaking. First, we removed the asbestos and replaced that with aluminum sheets. And went ahead on some of the workshops putting solar panels. Solar panels that are able to generate 400 kilowatt power of electricity of clean energy. After that, we engaged further with other partners and installed 3 more plants. So currently at the port of Mombasa, we have 3 solar plants that are able to generate a total of 1 megawatt hour of clean energy. And apart from that, we have also done water projects, water harvesting projects, and went further and actually installed a desalination plant. The amount of water that Port Mombasa was getting from the country of Mombasa was not adequate, and was not adequate to actually all the uses of the Port of Mombasa. So what we have done, we have a desalination plant that's able to generate 1 million liters a day, 1.2 million liters a day. It can generate more, but our consumption currently is around 1 million. Going forward, we want to share this with other institutions. Of course, so a time will come when the Port of Mombasa will use the same amount of water we use today for free, because the cost of running that initial plant might come from us sharing that water with other institutions. A similar plant, we are starting a bigger plant at the Port of Lamu. That is, in the end, generate almost 6 million liters of water to the port and all our industries that are related to the port. So this is a very important awareness session for us. Kenya Ports Authority, we are very positive in this program, ESG program, because it is actually in line with our efforts to make the port of Mombasa green. There are other programs, exploration programs that we are engaging, all towards making sure that the port of Mombasa becomes green. 2, as I conclude, Madam said, by you not a day will come when a ship or a certain shipping line refuse to come to the port of Mombasa because the port is not implementing certain security measures. So to seriously affect as the board of Mombasa, as Kenya Health Authority, we recognize that this is an institution, an organization that is worth working with, and we need support that program.
Thank you so much, Mombasa. Up next, I'd like to call Rita Gichero from the National Construction Authority. Rita is the Training and Capacity Building Officer. Rita, please, thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rita Gichero, as Maswa has introduced me. And I want to say that I stand here as a training and capacity building officer at National Construction Authority, but at the same time, I also stand here as a member of the Kenya Building Society. And so basically I'm here wearing two shoes. Yeah, so to go straight to the topic of the day, which is ESG, we'd like to say that ESG as a tool should be embraced, even as we discuss sustainability. We cannot really implement our sustainable programs without discussing ESG. Why? Because if you look at the history of when we started discussing climate change and all these sustainable programs, we just discussed environmental issues. And then we advanced, we discussed social issues. As we discussed sustainability, we also looked at how does it affect the social platform. But maybe what has been overlooked over time is the governance issue. Are we accountable? Once you're implementing all this, you're implementing sustainability. Are we accountable? Can we be able to say that, as last can we be able to report? This is how far we are and how far we are going. So as we advance, the impact on our activities on the climate should be considered. We want a better world for our future generations. We cannot discuss the environment without discussing our interactions. So I believe ESG will be the tool that will provide advanced sustainability, so to speak, interpersonal interaction, relationships. So especially for the construction industry, for which National Construction Authority is a regulator, we encourage the well-being of the construction workers. Everyone, all the clients, everyone involved in this arena. And so we're not just looking at as we continue to encourage the technical sustainability in our training programs, in our construction research areas, and even as we regulate our framework, we're also looking at their well-being. So we realize NCA as a regulator, we have three
Kwa hiyo tunasema gani? Hii ni ile nilikuwa nimeweka. Hii nilikuwa nimeweka. Hii ni jazz. Hii ni jazz nilikuwa nimeweka. Hii nilikuwa nimeongeza. Hii ni
and constantly at the camp,
So
alternative building materials. We also have exhibitions, where we encourage investors in these areas alternative technologies to encourage developers to be able to
workers, where we discuss all these issues. And well, I would like to mention that there's the CCID, which is the Industrial Development. We would like to call it an incubation center, where all these technologies, all this knowledge will be not just construction, but also, as we speak of construction, sustainability will be basically taught, or where we can say we'll start from as the construction industry. In winding up, I would like to state that some of the achievements we've had, even being part of the State Department of Public Works, in line with the Big Four agenda, affordable housing program, being able to deliver in terms of, as I mentioned, the ABMT, alternative building materials. We can say we have made a lot of strides in the issue of sustainability. We also have partnerships where we partner with KGBS. We've partnered with ISC3, which is the International Sustainable Chemistry Center, which is an arm of the GIZ, the German corporation GIZ, that deals with sustainable chemistry. And as we look towards this partnership, as we get into this partnership, we look forward to very successful programs coming up, and successful relations, and a better built construction environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, everyone. Up next, I'd like to invite the representative for the Chief Executive Officer of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, Mr. Gikonyo Gitonga, to say a few words.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. I'm representing the CEO of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, Ms. Carol Kariuki, who is currently out of the country and was not able to attend. I've just learned a new expression that I'm actually going to be back later on, but I have learned that now there's a new one. You say you were wearing two shoes, not two hats. so I'm going to wear two shoes. Now I'm wearing the KEPSA shoe, and then later on you'll see me wearing another shoe. But you'll see they're both shoes. Thank you. To most of you who maybe are not aware, or you know that there is a Kenya Private Sector Alliance. The Kenya Private Sector Alliance is an association of a number of corporates, the business member organizations, and various stakeholders. KGBS is a member of the KEPSA, Kenya Private Sector Alliance, and you'll see that most of the other people who will be on the panel that will be coming later on are also members of KEPSA. So definitely KEPSA is very delighted and honored to be working with KGBS at the launch of the ESG. ESG has become a very important tool, and will be a very important conversation that going forward. I do not want to repeat how important ESG is for us in Kenya and the industry. We are lucky that within KEPSA, we have got various associations like the Kenya Association of Manufacturing Association, AK, IQSK, Wire, Kenya Property Developers, all of them having the same conversation. And because there are many cross-cutting issues, we are going the sustainability, climate change, the circular economy are issues that we at KEPSA take at heart very strongly, and we play a very great advocacy role in our partnerships with the government, whichever government will be in place. So I just want to reassure KGPS that we will walk with you on this journey, and at least try to see how we can be able to bring more awareness to everyone about the importance of ESG. Wishing you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kenya Private Sector Alliance. So the last speaker for the first part of this session is Shrinal Sheth. Shrinal is the ESG investing lead at the World Economic Forum. Unfortunately, she couldn't join in physically, but she will be speaking virtually. So I just want to have a minute or two to set it up. Hi, Shrinal. Hi, Shrinal. Hi, Shrinal. Could you can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So first of all, thank you so much, Nasha and the Kenya Green Building Society for having me here today. As the project lead for investing at the World Economic Forum, environmental, social, and governance factors have really become a permanent fixture in most of my conversations with investors. However, I think it's important to point out that this is a relatively recent phenomenon. Despite the rise of ESG-focused investing, private investors, including those in Europe, have only just begun to prioritize ESG and the use of it as a value creation tool. In fact, in one of the recent reports I worked on in collaboration with the Boston Consulting Group, we laid out a wide spectrum of investors focused on ESG, from navigating stakeholder pressures, which is more of a compliance exercise, to using ESG sustainability strategies as a differentiating value creating opportunity, and also the vast difference in both intent and emerging from these investors. Now, shifting gears slightly, according to one study that I read recently, Africa currently attracts less than 3% of global private sector private finance, which is a pretty low number, and I'm sure we all agree. However, there is definitely strong discussion within the investment community about the opportunity that this provides, and also an understanding that climate resilience in Africa must also be tied to economic resilience. There is definitely avenues where investors need to think through about investing in technologies that Africa is pioneering, be green hydrogen or electric vehicles. However, investors are still very hesitant to invest in the market given their own ESG commitment, which tends to be tilted towards the environmental side. I therefore very strongly believe that for the international private investor community to accelerate their investment in Africa requires a strong focus on the social aspect of ESG. Over the past 18 months, the global narrative has of course shifted, especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion, mental health and well-being, employee well-being, etc. And all of these have been top of mind for investors and corporates alike. However, this hasn't translated to a clear understanding of how emerging economies are still being given the short end of the stick. And without enough capital, green industrialization is really not possible. And this is despite a lot of countries having very strong political governance in place. Impact investors, of course, have definitely been active and play an important role in providing de-risking capital, which actually brings me to 3 action and collaboration items that I think could move the needle on attracting more capital to Kenya and Africa as a whole. First, relating to the de-risking capital point, in fact, is that governments can consider additional fiscal incentives or make them conditional on ESG practices followed. I was recently speaking to a very prominent tech investor, and they mentioned that despite a worry about what they call the tech wreck, attractive valuations for them have been found in certain sectors in China, for instance, where they're eligible for government subsidies, such as semiconductors, for example. While it may not be easy to emulate the exact Chinese model or feasible, it can definitely lead to a very strategic injection of seed capital in the right sectors to attract both philanthropic investors like Acumen, for instance, and also individual investors like David Rubenstein, co-founder of the US private equity firm Carlyle, who has expressed explicit interest in investing his personal capital in Africa. However, it is important to note that Carlyle has definitely not invested in Africa for a while as a fund. Second, aligning ESG reporting to a common metrics and reporting framework, such as the one which is in the works by the IFRS Foundation's International Sustainability Standards Board, with the recent announcement and the work that the Nairobi Stock Exchange has done with GRI, I'm very positive that Kenya can definitely take a leadership role here and help in standardizing ESG reporting in Africa in a way that it definitely aligns with the global reporting framework, but is also still very unique to the needs of Africa and also other emerging economies. In this instance, I'm also positive that organizations such as the Kenya Green Building Society, in partnership with maybe others such as actually the World Economic Forum, can also play a very strong role. And finally, I think taking a page out of Ghana's playbook could be to create a special category for a recognized sustainable investor. And this is definitely not a new suggestion. In fact, the World Economic Forum collaborated with Kenya's Investment Authority in, I think, mid-2021, perhaps around August, in fact. And this came out as one of the key suggestions that was put forward by both the Forum and Kenya Investment Authority to accelerate sustainable investment in Kenya. And that brings me to the end of my speech today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rinal. I really appreciate having insights from the people who spoke to you this morning. So coming to the end of our first session, just a quick recap. I said we're here today because we have work to do. We've brought you in together. We've asked you to recognize that we have work against the backdrop that we are climate change champions of Africa. COP27 is in Africa, and we have the opportunity, therefore, with the world focusing on Kenya, to drive that conversation. And if we are to tie those things together and use ESG as a platform to get there and collectively implement the framework or action plan that I had earlier talked about, which is TSRRA, then I think we can start making headway in that direction by getting ESG right in Kenya and then being the pilot of getting ESG right in Africa. And with that, then, you can see that we've heard from the investors, we've heard from government, we've heard from the private sector, and we've also heard from regulators. And we're grateful to see that our regulators are very forward-thinking and very supportive. And equally, government's emphasis on working with us is very encouraging, as is private sector. Without further ado, I'd just like to thank you so much for paying attention so far and hand over to Mr. Gikonyo Gitonga to transition into the next session, which is the panel session. The next panel will be talking about the industry approach and industry perspective to ESG. So over to you, Mr. Gikonyo Gitonga. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to also call the first panel members forward. So I'll start off with Mr. Gikonyo Gitonga, who's the board director at the Kenya Property Developers Association. Please come forward. I'd then like to ask Mr. George Oluru, who is the chairperson of the Electricity Sector Association of Kenya, to come forward. I'd also like to invite Robin Emerson, the President of Women in Real Estate, to come forward, please. I'd also like to invite Owen Ombima, who's the Senior Officer, Sustainable Business and Social Impact for Safaricom PLC, to come forward. I'd like to invite Steve Wood, who is the HSSEQ Director at Aecon Holdings. I hope I got it right. And then I'd like to invite Florence Nyole, who's the Vice President of the Architectural Association of Kenya, to come forward, please. I also want to invite Abraham Samoe, who is the President of the Institution of Surveyors of Kenya, to come forward. And lastly, without further ado, I'd also want to invite Jennifer Musimi, who's the President of the Institute of Quantity Surveyors of Kenya. But before we jump in, I'd like to take a minute to just recognize our sponsors for this event. I'd like to recognize Kangwana in association with Clyde & Co. for walking this journey with us and supporting us. Thank you so much. I'd also like to recognize EY, who have been supportive and working with us on this journey. Thank you so much. I also would like to recognize the Architectural Association of Kenya, who've also been long friends and supporting us through this journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's got a very distinguished panel. I won't introduce them again. That was done by Nazra. But Robin, you'll be pleasantly surprised that we have compliant with gender. This is it's an ESG event. We have to be compliant. So I think we've done well. Rather, the organized. It's actually so that's because of the as I see you and the ESG lead here to get it right. But I'd like to welcome all the panelists. I will ask one question to each one of them. They will say, answer those questions. But what I've asked the organizers to do, we will also try and put up a Mentimeter. I don't know, has anyone heard of Mentimeter? And it's going to be put up so that you can answer questions, you can put your questions or make comments so that we reduce some of the time that we will take. We're going to have a very short, we're going to try and run this through very quickly. And also, just, George, relax. Please relax. I know that you've seen that you are here with 3 presidents, 2 are ladies, and a vice president. This is not the presidential debate. The presidential debate is going to take place on Tuesday. So just relax. I know you are just saying, well, now I'm a chairperson in front of these presidents. And also, just to some of the rules that are in the presidential debate don't apply here. So you're allowed to clap and you're allowed to cheer. The only thing you're not allowed to do is to boo. So thank you very much. That's the Mentimeter code. So does everyone know how to use Mentimeter? If you don't know, raise your hand. Just be, I know you might not know, but what you do is you go to, on your phone or your computer, just go to menti.com, type in that code or scan that code, and you'll enter it into Mentimeter. And then after that, we'll be able to have those questions scrolled out as we go along. So my first question will be to George. At least I'm asking you the question, although you're not a president. Tell us, what role do you think that the energy industry has in the ESG journey? What trends are you seeing in the industry as a result of ESG? Sorry.
I'm not vying to be president, just so you know. I'm from the Electricity Sector Association of Kenya. I also wear 3 shoes, actually. Yeah, 3 shoes. I chair the Electricity Sector Association of Kenya. I'm also chair of the KEPSA Energy and Extractive Sector Board. And I work for a Spanish company called Ecoena. We're an independent power producer. So, of course, the ESG has quite a big role in the energy sector. I think of all the sectors, we are the ones who have probably even started this journey earlier, maybe out of compliance more than own self-will of doing it. But it's due to the kind of negative effects the energy sector has had in the past, like in the early 1900s up to now, the old technology we used to use and the way they affected communities and the environment. Therefore, institutions such as the IFC, and I'm happy to be seated right next to the IFC banner here. IFC has come up with things we call the IFC performance standards. And they govern a lot of things in how we work in the energy sector. We, of course, I think as the last speaker talked about, for us the most important thing, I guess, is the social aspect. Because for all our energy projects, we do them within communities. And really, I think we've seen both positive and negative examples of what can go right or wrong if you don't involve your community at the core of the planning of your projects. We've seen in Kenya, for instance, we've seen a wind project that we had, I think the investor had already brought in all the equipment, and then finally when they went to construct, boom, community issues, project not built. But on the other side, we've also seen like really good examples. Same wind projects, we see them doing houses for the community. We see the community getting even shares and participating in the process of running the project. So really, Gikonya, I would say ESG plays a huge role, a huge role. Even before we defined it as ESG, because it was just maybe still being run under the environmental social impact assessment kind of framework, where we look at both the built environment, the flora, the fauna. You might be surprised that we mostly talk about renewable energy and just assume just because it's renewable energy it's good. But if you really drill down to the kind of issues that we have to face, whether it's from things like avifauna, so birds and bats, those kind of effects that some of our projects have, and especially wind farms, we have issues with even solar farms in terms of flicker reflections and how you will affect I think people like pilots and whether they can fly over or close to where your site is. So what I'm trying to say is that ESG is extremely important for us. It's actually, for us, since most of these projects are financed internationally, it's part of the requirements of how you actually develop the project. So it's already built into the process of developing the project. And in terms of trends, 0 minutes. In terms of trends, I think we have seen companies develop what we call shared value plans. So these days we have our communities also get some value out of projects, working together with them over and above just taking care of the environment. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, George. I think it is, we just have to make sure that we keep the time so that there's a lot, so that we can get the participants also, the people attending to us questions. I'll go next to the president. President, why is gender an important issue for organizations?
Okay, good morning again. Thank you very much for inviting us to be here and asking us to look at ESG and from a inclusion, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I want to just read a couple of stats to you as I start out and ask you, what year do you think these stats are from, if you don't mind? 72% of respondents believe that women should work less and devote more time to caring for their family. 36% agree that a man's job is to earn money while a woman is to look after the house and the family. 44% agree that it is natural for men to earn more than women, as they should be the main providers. What year do you think that this is? 1910? 1976? 1960. This report came out last month or a month or so ago. 2022. This is a Kenyan, these are the perceptions of Kenyans, they survey. I think I can finish. I think I'm done.
Just one question, and now it hits home.
It hits home. And then the other side of that is, if you, I am going to finish. I do have a lot to say, and please meet me over there. There's some tables over there. We can continue to talk. But the other flip side of that is that 85, 90% of people say these things should happen. There should be equity. We should have so forth and so on. But then on the other side, the reality is that, these are some cultural beliefs, if you will. So I do want to just flip it a little bit. Can I get 1 minute? Great. And you look at the G, the S, and the E, if I can go that direction. And so WIRE is extremely proud that we have put a lot of emphasis on that governance side and seeing who is leading and who's making these decisions, who's in the boardrooms, who's at the tables that is making the decisions that impacts how women are involved, how women are included. But it's not just women. And I do also wear several hats. My colleague is here from Habitat for Humanity. And we also are proud to have just recently received the best workplace to work because of our diversity, equity, and inclusion. How many of us in here are on that matrix? How many of your companies are on that matrix? And people say it's because of your inclusion policies. That's why I want to work there. Now, I could continue and go on, but I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robin, for that very insightful about gender. I'll now ask Safaricom. I'll ask Owen Obima to tell us about the Safaricom journey with ESG and what lessons have you learned. I'd like to now wearing the other hat now because I can only wear two shoes. I'm not like George. I actually have had an experience with Safaricom going back to the year 2000. We were the first site acquisition agents for Safaricom. When you see all these BTSs all over the place, we were acquiring them. And at that time, the issues about environment were very low key. But tell us the journey.
Thank you very much, Bikoyo. So, from Safaricom side, our ESG journey started way earlier, and it started when you started acquiring sites for us. That is in the year 2000, when we realized we did not only exist to connect Kenyans, but to transform lives. Fast forward to 2012, we made a deliberate decision to start reporting on our ESG journey, and we started by reporting our carbon emissions, that is our Scope 1 and Scope 2. My colleague from the electricity knows what those mean. In 2014, we developed and published a children's right policy and business principle policy, which helps us ensure children are not exploited or neglected by any of our operations. And in that same year, we decided to start assuring our numbers by engaging independent firms. 2015, we decided to add revisions to our procurement policy, where we included sections for our diversity and inclusion. We focused on special interest groups, to be specific, women, youth, and persons with disabilities, so that they will be involved and engaged in our supply chain. In 2016, we launched the SDGs into the organization, and we focused on 9 out of the 17 SDGs, which tied to the company. And in 2018, we became more granular, and we integrated these SDGs into supplier objectives. Sorry, not supplier, staff objectives, so that as you set up your objectives for the year, you had to tailor it to an SDG so that you know your contribution to the SDGs. And in 2019, we did the first African Shared Value Summit, where we welcomed 300 leaders into the country to discuss on the responsible ways of doing business. Up to last year now, we became more deliberate and we did a purpose strategy. The purpose strategy was focusing on 4 key pillars, which we are looking to implement from this year. The first one being on creating shared value, focusing on the planet, responsible business, and finally, our people and the world around us. What lessons did we learn from our journey in the 10 plus years, from 2000, that's about 22 years. Sustainability is not a destination, but it's a journey. You need not only to know your numbers, but you need to show your numbers and grow your numbers. And finally, the tone needs to be set from the top. We are fortunate enough that our board and executive leadership teams support us in all our ESG. As Safaricom, we don't do these things because it's expected from us. We do it simply because it's the right thing to do. And as I finish, as the private sector, I believe we are in a unique position to drive positive change now more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Owen. I think now the next question I'm going to ask to Aecon, Steve Wood. He is going to tell us, you're going to tell us more about, ESG is not new to Aecon. However, there's an issue or consideration you wanted to share as you continue on your journey. So maybe you can share what, or your journey at Aecon and with ESG.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for the invite, of course, today, and it's great to be amongst some fantastic people. And I've already met 2 presidents already. It's not even 10 o'clock. So it's been great for me. So yeah, ESG is quite a new journey, and you stole a lot of the words that I was going to say, by the way. I think the journey started really for Aecon in 2019, so it is quite new. And I think right at the start, it was really driven by IFC standards, the performance standards, and our major investors and partners, Helios, Page, the Private Infrastructure Development Group, Infraco, Africa, and Garanco. So that's when it started. Where I'm very proud, I've only been here since November last year, really enjoying this journey. When it started in 2019, it was because investors really demanded it. But where we are today in 2022, and you stole my words, we do it now because it's the right thing to do. It's taken a couple of years to really sink in, for really our board of directors and our executive committee to actually grasp it. We really need to do this. But now it is, we really need to do this, because focusing now on it is the right thing to do. I think you know, we've taken big strides. We have GRESB. We're 4-star awards in GRESB, and actually we're the #1 in Africa, which we're very, very proud of. And this year we also measured ourselves outside of the real estate business, and also looked at EcoVadis, which is all industry, and we managed to get ourselves a silver award. And awards are important, and Nazra, you said right at the start, one of the things that you need to do and you are going to do is awards. And awards is really, it's recognition for what we've actually managed to achieve in quite a short period of time. It is a journey, you're absolutely right, it's not a destination. My whole week in Nazra joined us on Monday, Tuesday. My whole week has been ESG. Am I getting sick of it? Actually, no, it's quite exciting, you know. I've just spent the rest of the week with Pidge here, in that they've created a thing called the Nairobi Institute. So yeah, it's been a hell of a week. How much time have I got?
None. Zero.
I have 0. I didn't know I was looking at you. Sorry. I wondered where people were getting their information from. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That's quite nice. Great. So actually, next is the vice president or deputy president, whichever, I don't know. What role do you think architects play in the sustainability journey? With you being the vice president at AK, what role do you?
Thank you very much, Gikonyo and KGBS, our partners, for giving us this opportunity. I just want to clarify also that AK has actually now we have 8 chapters. So it's not just architects, we have engineers, quantity surveyors, planners, environmental design consultants, quantity surveyors, we have construction project managers, really 8, and we've just added interior designers. So the architectural means everybody who's involved in the built environment. And as built environment professionals, I just wish to clarify that we are actually taught in school to be sustainable. We have, and I can see my colleagues here, board member Guru, we are actually taught to have build sustainably. We have those tools in our hands. It's not something that you stumble upon. It is incorporated in our curriculum, and it's important that as we continue to design and to build, to practice these things. That's where the challenge is. The practice has changed. People are singing to the tune of their clients. Their clients are demanding buildings with glass, but we need to educate them and tell them that, look, buildings with glass have certain effects. They look very fancy and nice, but eventually they lead to the greenhouse gas effect within the spaces. So all built environment professionals need to go back to their core mandate to design sustainably, how they orient their buildings, how they ensure that there's cross ventilation, where there's natural lighting. If I was to sit here, all our lights are on, but ideally we have such beautiful sunshine. Well, not today because we're in July, but ideally we should be having daylighting coming into our spaces. That reduces the amount of energy that you're consuming to light our buildings, to ventilate our buildings, and so on and so forth. So architects and professionals in the built environment do have a major role to play. In fact, we are told that buildings do contribute to more than 50% of the greenhouse gas emissions that we're talking about today. So our role is really, really major. That also another thing is to think about the kind of materials that we're using. A lot of materials that are brought into our country have lots of embodied energy, aluminium, glass, steel, which we're importing all the way from China. Yet locally, we have materials which we should be beginning to embrace and to encourage ourselves to use locally. Then the other thing also is to continuously remind ourselves. I think green design principles are, evolving and changing and coming into the fore. So it's to continuously capacity build ourselves and to do this very importantly. Last but not least, and I believe KGBS is doing this through IC Edge, is to also rate our buildings. AK has a green building tool, the Safari green building tool, which we launched last year. And what you're trying to say is that we want to have a tool that is specific to the topics where we live here in Kenya, and we should start rating our tool, rating our buildings, and eventually awarding and recognizing those people who are pushing the envelope when it comes to green design. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Florence. That's true, rating buildings. I'm a commercial office space practitioner. Many years ago, I did work where we were looking at HSE, and at that time, it's about 15, 16 years ago, and I didn't realize how important it was. Now, occupiers are going to evaluate buildings on ESG, and if you don't have the ESG compliant, you will find that your building will be empty. So a lot of buildings that are going to have to be retrofitted. So the questions, let them continue coming on. If you've not registered, please register on menti.com and use that code. And then you post your questions, and these questions will be going to the panelists. So some of the panelists, you'll find some questions that are going to be directed at you. So the next round of you speaking, I would ask you to answer to those questions as you go along. So if you don't have your phone, any of the panelists or your iPad, please just get it because the questions are coming. I don't want to repeat these questions and ask you those questions. I just want you to quickly go to the questions and answer them as when I come to the next round. Now, what I'll do, the next group is I have two presidents. So now, who do I choose first? I think I should just, of course, start with the lady. So then, Jennifer Msimi, she's the president of the Institution of Quantity Surveyors of Kenya. So tell us the ESG journey for your profession as quantity surveyors, and maybe you can even answer maybe one of the questions that is relevant that has been asked on the Mentimeter. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that, for this opportunity. What's the ESG journey or status in the construction industry of professionals? We are compliant, or in the process of getting compliant, because as quantity surveyors, we are the pace setters of the construction projects. And when you look at the contracts, documentation, we have all those environmental, social, and governance issues listed there. Maybe it's because NEMA is right at the front pushing for environmental sustainability, or it's just the government of Kenya saw it fit in the past. We have things like disposal of waste well taken care of. Responsible deforestation, when you're cutting trees, must be responsible. We have sanitation already included in that, for the social welfare. And recently we have inclusion of gender. The number of women workers you see in the construction industry are much more. So we are doing well, but this is not the end. What can be done better is to continue sensitization. We are not reminding people that these items in this era of ESG trending, that they are already with them. We could, remind them, retrain them, and maybe devise a new way of reporting. We could work and see with KGBS how these reporting, so that for compliance can be directed to you or to any other body, so that we look like we are whatever we are in compliance. What else can be done? I think we can work with all those institutions who are on board, ways of rebates. Can the government give rebates for those people who are using alternative materials? And it's something that is at the back of those policies, but no one ever comes to implement it. So that is something I think we can do. Together also we can see how we can recognize and award people, because these things are being done. How can we have them report for award system? Yes.
Thank you very much, Jennifer, from you as representing the quantity surveyors. And I think now I'll go next to last but not least, and have to be very careful. This is the president of the institution where I'm a member. And I didn't realize that I had put him last. I think, I don't know whether I might get some black marks for that, but I am not the organizer of this event, so utanisamehe. I just, Abraham Samoei Institution of Quantity Surveyors, Institution of Surveyors of Kenya, which includes land surveyors, valuers, estate agents, property managers, all that. So maybe, Abraham, you can tell us a bit about the journey for the ISK with regard to ESG.
Thank you. Thank you, Gikonyo. And as you can see, I'm Wakenya. I think we learned from the debate that you have to come with something. But I may not set my own question because I saw them setting their question and answering. But I would want to say, as professionals in the land and built environment, we are very keen on the ESG targets, the 2030 ESG targets. And if you look at what we see as 4 challenges in the land sector. That is global warming, urban sprawl, housing affordability, and conflicts relating to land. You are aware there is an ongoing conflict with my counterpart with a local university on use of land. These are challenges that happen on sustainable use of land. And as professionals, of course, we give our input in addressing these challenges. More so if you look at the use of buildings, because the built environment contributes more than 50% of greenhouse gases. The use of sustainable materials, conservation of energy, water, and waste management. I think we encourage our professional members through training and sensitization to keep an eye on this. In subdivisions for development, ensure that they are consistent with the local community requirements, and check on urban sprawl. Urban sprawl is a very big challenge in Africa. I think we are not a planning society generally. If you look at the general development of Africa, so the affordable housing debate, I think, has been going on in Kenya and more so, I think, developing countries, how to deliver affordable housing. And as professionals, we are involved in this. And I think that calls for continuous training and of the professionals. I'm happy the architects have it in their curriculum, but I think also for us, it's in our curriculum. But I think we have seen classroom and outside, there's usually a divide, especially by making sure that the professional has local content, local context. I think calls for continuous training. The involvement of professionals. Many people want to ignore professional advice, involvement, until they are in a gridlock, when they want you to pull them out. I think if those 4 challenges that I've mentioned, if we have professionals involved in the process, you would limit that. And then reward for competent professionals in ESG. I think we have a yardstick of fees based on what you can do, but your competence, if we have more reward for people in ESG with competence, it encourages uptake, more talent, and more delivery. I think that's what I would say would be our journey and what we see going forward, especially in Kenya and Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abraham, for your comments. I mean, thank you very much for all the panelists for being able to keep to time and answering your questions, very relevant. We'll go to the next session where is the question and answer. What I had done, we've used this technology of Menti.com. We've asked you to post your questions, and most of you have posted your questions. But I've also realized that in Kenya, if we don't allow somebody to catch a mic and ask a question, you guys will go back saying that moderator is a dictator. So I will allow for 2 or 3 questions to be asked by somebody who has decided not to embrace technology. And when you stand up, you be very careful. You ask the question, just introduce yourself, ask the question, and also remember we will then know you as the person who refused to embrace technology. So thank you. Who wants to go first? Who would like to ask a question? Oh, yes, please, you can just be given the mic. And please remember what I've just said.
Good morning, everyone. My name is John Okulo, and I work for NCBA Bank. Mine is more a comment and possibly a question to the esteemed panelists here. As financial institutions, we play a very key role in ensuring that capital flows that allows these projects, construction projects, to come up. What I would like to encourage you is to encourage the the professionals and the investors who are part of your associations to stick to and to appreciate the importance of ESG. And certainly as a bank, as NCBA, we're very passionate about it, and we do believe that, as many of the colleagues here have said, that the importance of respecting the environment, the society, and having strong governance processes are not just good for us today, but for the future. And so I think working with financial institutions in educating their clients on the importance of ESG will take us a long way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Is there anyone who would like to, let's get more questions, and then I'll give a chance to the panelists to answer the questions, whichever they find appropriate. Anybody else who wants to ask a question? Anyone else? No one else wants to be as bold as John? No, please, I wasn't trying to scare you. Gentlemen there at the end, and then Nazra, and then we can close it.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandy from FSD Africa, and my question is to Owen. What would you consider to be Safaricom's flagship ESG product or service, and why?
Okay. Just let's finish the questions, and then we'll give a chance to everyone to answer. Yes, Chris. There's Chris, and then Nazra. Yeah, Chris.
Yes, thank you. So my question is to the professionals, the associations. How do you, what would you expect the county government to support professionals so that they adopt ESG? Because as government, we get all these typical plans with the standard masonry walling and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we have to approve these things. But how can we encourage the adoption of ESG, particularly from the private sector?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My question is to Aecon and Safaricom, but the others can chip in. Given that your companies have started ESG reporting, I'm curious to know what lessons have you learned from your journey, and what would you say, for example, if you were to talk to a company who's about to start that journey? Is there anything you'd ask them to do differently from yourselves? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's end with those questions. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start from my right, starting with Abraham. If you see any questions that you want to answer, and also give your part in short, and then we go this way. So any questions you think that you could answer, or the one from the audience, and please remember to respond to NCBA, because you and me, we know that we have some issues with NCBA. Yeah, so we'll discuss that later offline.
Thank you. I think I would say from the professional perspective, professionals are drivers in knowledge and expertise in these areas of ESG. So the involvement is very key to achievement by the country. Clients naturally would want to save on cost for their return. So you always have a conflict on what is to be done vis-a-vis what the client wants. So the biggest challenge is to ensure that the professional has the capacity to do so, knowledge-wise and expertise-wise, and the support through the regulator. I think regulatory role is key in developing countries for compliance. So I think we should also continue advocating, because we still have a gap of what's happening globally. I think the general globe trends have moved far ahead of what Africa is looking at. As somebody said, we have 3% capital coming into sustainable development or finance, I think that leaves 97% to other people. So we need to continue advocating. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. I'll respond to three questions. One, what kind of the counties help in this ESG thing? I think you could improve in the enforcement. For starters, you could obligate contractors and all that to have a reporting methodology, maybe a template so that you check off all those issues. Then affordable housing from the Mentimeter. Are they compliant? I feel they're fairly compliant because the buildings have gone to the sites. They are designed to be energy efficient because they are not designed to use artificial ventilation, and they're well lit. And environmentally, you can see they're being responsible. Disposal of garbage and taking care of workers, inclusion of female and all that, and the use of local building materials. But there's a gap. They are not reporting. They're not telling people what they're doing about ESGs. And that brings me to my closing remarks is KGBS to devise and draft guidelines on how this reporting is going to be done, because as professionals, we want to support you. And this is new to us. It's been done, but it's new to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I know the timekeeper has already put up saying that I've got 5 minutes for all of you. I don't know how we're going to do that. But what I'm going to do is that we will encourage some of the questions to be answered by you as a panelist on the Mentimeter, and all these questions and answers will then be emailed to everyone who was here, so that at least people get. So try and be brief. 5 minutes was 5 minutes ago. So can you imagine how long you guys have? So please, can we start with Owen? Go on.
Thank you, Kikonyo. I'll try as much as possible to summarize, and if there's any more questions, we can side chat. So the flagship product and service related to ESG for Safaricom, I will say we have two. We have the Net Zero project and integrated waste management. The integrated waste management focuses on creating a circular economy around waste, where we introduced segregation in all our facilities. That is our offices and our shops. And we are currently recycling 88% of our waste using partnerships with Takataka Solution, who are our partners. And on Net Zero, we are focused on becoming a net zero carbon emitting company by 2050 by reducing our scope 1 and scope 2. I will answer another question which was relating to this from the Mentimeter. How do we calculate our scope 1 and 2 emission? So scope 2 emissions relate to purchased electricity. How are we able to turn that purchased electricity and transform it into an equivalent amount of carbon emission? It's simply by subjecting it to carbon factors, which are, we use DEFRA and greenhouse gas protocols. For scope 1, which is on fuel and refrigerants, it's the same methodology, which we take the quantities in terms of liters on the fuel and the refrigerants which we use, and we subject it to the carbon emission factors from DEFRA and greenhouse gas protocols. I think there was a question from Nasra on lessons and what will a new company do differently. So I think I'd mentioned that as we started. So our lesson was, the key one was sustainability is a journey, not a destination. So you need to start first of all, and start with a low-hanging fruit. What industry are you in, and what is something you can tackle? Start with that first, as you're building capacity, networking, coming to events like this so that you socialize and you're able to build muscle and capacity for the rest of the ESG issues.
Thank you. Next, please just remember that you're eating into the time of the next person. So, when we leave here, you will feel very guilty. So So can you go on, George?
In the spirit of governance of time, I answer only 2 questions from Menti. I think there's one on the percentage of renewable energy. We are about 80% installed capacity of renewable energy in geothermal, wind, solar, hydro. But in terms of the actual energy that we use on a day-to-day basis, it's something close to 94. So Kenya is like one of the best countries, leading countries in the world in terms of the proportion of renewable energy in the electricity that we use. In terms, there's another question on just transition and carrying the communities along. I think, as I mentioned in my opening speech, the role of the community is probably the greatest in terms of these kind of projects that we do on the energy sector. Same for renewable energy projects. We need to carry the communities along, and I think part of that also is including what Chris was asking around the county governments becoming partners with us on how we ensure we really carry the community along. Of course, you as the custodians of the interests of the communities. I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you.
Go.
How did you speak so fast?
Exactly. So I was just looking at the challenges of implementation, and again, I want us to continue to focus that there is an S, there is still a G there. I hear a lot of talk on focus on the E, but we have to get in. If you don't have the G part, the E has no framework, nowhere to even exist. And so please, I think that's the main thing for me. Get that right. You get your governance, your framework, your strategy. Do you have a strategy for inclusion? Do you have a career path that says somebody's going to come in here and they're going to go there? What is that? You have to be clear about that. So that's one challenge to implementation. But inside of the built environment and our mission of gender equality, gender equity, even disabilities, people with disabilities in our sector. Just look around at your workplace and see the lack of diversity that's in these spaces, and thinking we are so arrogant that we're the only ones using these built spaces and using these cities. And so we need to think more broadly about that. And so I'm on the board. I can put on hats and scarves and all sorts of other things. So I'm on the board of Build Her, and Build Her is all about getting women artisans and getting in these spaces. And so then I jump into what can government do. We've heard here where the impetus has come from investors, outside investors. So why can't the government? You are the ones that are the largest builders and the largest developers in the country. When you're doing those tenders, put these things inside of there and make it a requirement. That's the incentive nature. And also developers, you also have the purse, and you also have the ability to say, these are the contractors, this is the kind of work that I want you to do. But on the demand side, I'm so proud that BuildX recently has launched a Zimmer Homes, which is thinking about women and how they use their homes and how they use their spaces. And I will tell you, it's the right thing to do, but it's also good business. They've almost sold out in an early phase because of its lead, its technology, its edge development. And so not only is it right, it makes good business sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
I can't talk that fast.
Okay.
But I'll try. Just continuing what you said there as developers and the influence that we can have. I think you're absolutely right in terms of the influence that we can have on the contractors that we employ to build our affordable housing, our purpose-built student accommodation. We can have a huge effect on that, and you're absolutely right, and I'll take that away and make action. And as to answer your question, I think we discussed this before. All of our buildings managed are EDGE. Every one of our 7 properties are EDGE certified, and very proud of that. But what does that mean? People don't understand it. So if I was going to do anything different from a reporting perspective, it's just getting people be transparent, but also get people to understand why we need this information instead of just saying, give me the data. When people start to understand and also feel that they're a part of actually not just reporting, but part of the improvements that we're making, it is inclusion. It's getting everybody included. It's getting everybody to understand why we're doing this, not just do it.
Thanks. Florence.
I guess I have 0 minutes. But I think I'll just say three things. Someone has asked something about policies. Yes, there are very many policies out there. I know the building code has now been revised, and the NCA is, at the forefront of that. It does have a strong component on green buildings, and it is actually counties who implement the building code. The question coming through, how can counties ensure ESG? I don't think for a long time they actually refer to the building code. There's a whole code there, and it's important that we do follow, because it already has a lot of principles that we can begin to look at. But I think at the same time, professionals need to be kind of like coerced. There's the story of, do you dangle a carrot or carry a stick, to push people towards this thing. I think it's important. Our professionals can decide maybe every year before you get your license renewed, one ECG point. Show us how you've contributed to ECG throughout the year in your practice and in what it is that you're doing. 1, 2, 3, depending on your organization. Architects should probably look for 10, because we are the leaders in implementing the same. And I think when it goes to the banks, the same way banks calculate, return on investment in anything that they are putting their money into, they also need to put in a component on ESG. Because at the end of the day, if you just put a small component, even if it's 5 to 10% of what is required, they will begin to comply. I know people who've gone to banks with, unfortunately, designs that will not be, will not actually give them return on investment. And banks are able to tell them, no, this will not work for you. So we should also have a component in there when you're doing your analysis that ESG is very important. Show us how you're going to deal with it. And it cuts across the board, from roads that are being built, let's take for instance the expressway, all the way to literally small little houses that are being built in communities. And that will begin to encourage people to not only look at buildings as just the four walls, but larger than that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank, let's give a round of applause to all our panelists. Thank you very much. They've given us very insightful quotes and things. I hope KGBS will take some of these quotes and put them on social media, attributing them to some of the panelists. I must say this is the largest panel that I've ever moderated, and I've really tried. I really tried to keep them in check. But just remember that we are all Kenyans, and when you give a Kenyan a mic, he will not stop, short of you going and snatching the microphone. So since you couldn't do that, I had the leeway just to continue. So thank you very much to all of you, and thank you for your questions. Continue making the asking questions and comments on Mentimeter. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, guys. That was amazing. I just wanted to inform the panelists and the speakers today. We will be taking pictures post the event, so please stay behind so that we can take those pictures. For our next panel, I'd like to invite the moderator for the same, Alex Devereaux from Kangwana in association with Clyde & Co. This panel will be taking the investor perspective, the investor and financier's perspective. Without further ado, I'd like to invite the next panel members, starting with Jane Wayaki-Maina, who is the Head of Sustainability and Citizenship at Absa Bank. Please come forward. Up next, I'd like to invite Utsav Mule, who is the Manager, Climate Change and Energy in Telecap. Next, I'd like to invite Anthony Muthusi, who's a partner at EY, to come forward, please. Okay. Next, I'd like to invite Mary Njuguna, who's the Principal Specialist at FSD Africa. Up next, I'd like to invite Rosalind Gino, who's the Senior Public Affairs and Communications Officer from the Kenya Bankers Association. And last but not least, I'd like to invite Reshma Shah, who is the Group Head, ESG and Reputational Risk from Equity Bank. Thank you so much, guys. Over to you. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Nasra, for doing the introductions. As lawyers, we advise on all aspects of construction and infrastructure projects, and that includes the risks and opportunities around compliance with ESG, both sort of contractually and regulatory. One thing we hear a lot from our clients, and both developers and contractors, is that it helps when guidance comes from the top. And that means, I think, both regulators, but also investors and lenders as well. And it's interesting to hear Steve say the same thing today about Aecon. With that in mind, it's great to be joined with panelists from across the spectrum of the investment and lender community. I think going straight into the questions, Jane, if I could please start with you. How do you think lenders can help drive sustainability amongst their borrowers and adoption of ESG principles? And do you think that's happening in Kenya now, and what needs to be done to encourage that further?
Thank you very much. Good morning. I think we're still in morning, right? Yeah, good morning, everyone. KGBS, thank you for convening this. I think it's a great conversation. I think the first panel has done a fantastic job. Just over to your question, and I think a lot has already been spoken to. When I look at the role of the financial sector, really, it's the engine that keeps everything moving. Everyone needs capital to be able to do something. And therefore, I think the financial sector has really a critical role first in building capacity and educating their clients and the industry at large on what sustainability actually means, what it means for business, what it means for the environment, what it means, and how it all comes together. Because I think there's quite a huge gap in understanding, and a lot has been said about ESG. It's not a good to do. It's actually critical to the survival of business. And therefore, capacity building is one of the areas I think the financial sector needs to get involved in at a retail level, corporate level, sector level, just to build that capacity. And then secondly, I'd say the financial institution has a role to help accelerate the pace. And one of the things that can help accelerate the pace is incentivizing, because we've gotten many clients asking, why would I want to do a green building? It's more expensive for me at the onset. Yeah, you might talk about all the benefits in the long run, but I need to construct it now, and there's a huge financial impact. And the question is then, what role can the financial services sector play to incentivize and therefore help accelerate that pace? And I think our regulators are very awake to the fact that ESG is quite critical. And just seeing the guidelines from the CBK and what role now they are going to start playing in driving how banks actually look at a facility, a loan, and how they price that in the long run. Because I think we should be able to incentivize those who are picking the green route, and not to punish really, but pay the price for the environmental challenges or social challenges created by your business. And I think we may do it proactively now, and I can say it's probably not been done much, but we will start seeing it, especially with the climate risk guidelines from the CBK. And lastly, I think the financial institution first needs to also look at itself as an organization, and therefore change starts from within. I think financial services sector needs to walk the talk, and there is an opportunity, because what I've seen when financial institution or an organization actually does walk the talk, you get to understand better, and therefore you have more relevant products and propositions to support that journey, as compared to just churning out products which really do not drive the cause. And we have to have business model innovation to drive sustainability. So there are many more, but I don't want to eat into the next panelist time. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Shane. And I think what you're saying about walking the talk is hugely important when you're talking about capacity building as well. If you've been through the process yourself, then it helps your borrowers and your clients to learn the lessons from you as well. Utsav, Intellicap describes itself as an ecosystem builder. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what that means, what the role of an ecosystem builder is in driving ESG principles, and then perhaps also touch on the sort of carbon credit market and how that can help drive change as well.
Sure, thanks a lot, Alex. So basically, Intellicap is a part of the Avishkar Group, which is a $1.2 billion assets under management company. We are the consulting arm, and our mandate is to focus on the underserved 3 billion globally. So as Intellicap, what we do is we channelize capital and expertise to build a more equitable society. And we do that through strategic advisory, we do that through capacity building, technical assistance for a variety of programs. We have a strong climate change and clean energy practice through which we drive this. About your second part about the carbon credits and its role in ESG, I think it's important to understand the key drivers which are driving this change for carbon markets. So first of all is Kenya's NDC in 2015, which identified a funding gap of $40 billion, which was consequently revised to about $65 billion to achieve its NDC targets and reductions in GHG emissions by 2030. Secondly, we also have climate emission reduction of the 32% by 2030 for Kenya. Thirdly, there's pressure by investors. I think we've gone over that again and again. But something is happening right now where there is an increase of ESG mandated funds, but the markets where it's most needed is not actually able to attract that capital because of a lack of data in the market, a lack of benchmarking practices, a lack of ESG indicators and KPIs which are not being measured. So once we have these in place, that's when the capital can start flowing to these areas. And finally, of course, we have talked a lot about building an energy sector, but Kenya also has a strong nature-based solution as well as blue economy area where carbon credits can be generated. So, and of course the aviation sector as well. So in a nutshell, that's how these drivers of demand can push for progress in the ESG space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Musab. If I can ask a follow-up question just on the point you made about the sort of gap in data and benchmarking practices, where does that come from? What's the kind of next step, do you think, in bringing that to the fore and making that finance available to borrowers here?
Sure, that's a great question. And I think it speaks to Nasra's point also about making Kenya a success pilot story for ESG. So we understand that there's a big alphabet soup of terms of ESG. Hopefully it is being reconciled right now, and with the Nairobi Securities Exchange mentioning GRI as the preferred standard, we are moving towards where it's going to be easier to report to one common standard, which will make recording progress easier, comparing different companies, historically the same company as well as different companies within the same sector. That will become easier over time. We're on the journey.
No, absolutely.
It's happening.
Brilliant, thank you. Mary, next to you. What is FSD Africa's role as a development agency in driving Kenya's adoption of ESG principles? And perhaps also you could speak to us about how that's linked to specific climate finance, green finance becoming available.
Thank you very much, and thanks to KGBS also for inviting us to be part of this session. I think this is a topic that is close to our hearts and is really a big part of what we do. In fact, I think all we do at this time. So FSD Africa is a development agency. It was funded in 2012 and it was set up in 2012 and funded by UK Aid. And our mandate is to make finance work for Africa's future. If I could break that down a little bit, we work across various subsectors of the financial sector. I work with the capital markets team, but we also work across insurance, building the risk and resilience of African markets, including Kenya, and also leveraging on digital economy digitization to make financial markets stronger. The last thing I'd say is that we also have an investment arm, FSD Africa Investments, that actually makes investments in demonstrative and innovative transactions. How we do this, and just to come to your point really, is that we use various tools. We have financial and non-financial tools. we work across different parts of the ecosystem. So we work on a market systems approach. So we work both with the providers of capital, the users of capital, those who need the capital, as well as the enabling environment, that is regulators and policymakers. So if I can speak about the regulatory environment, for example, we work with various regulators in Kenya and other parts of Africa. We worked closely with the Capital Markets Authority, the insurance regulator, and even the pensions regulator in integrating ESG in the various policies that we have in place. I think what is interesting is that Kenya, as has been said earlier, is a leader in various ways in that regard. And there are many lessons that can be learned from other countries. But that said, I think there's still much to do in terms of building, integrating ESG in policies and regulation. But let me give maybe 2 examples of transactions actually that we've supported, because we don't just work on the enabling environment, we also provide technical assistance to actually catalyze capital or mobilize capital in the Kenyan capital market. Actually, the Acorn bond and the Acorn REIT those are transactions that are close to us. We've supported, we provide the technical assistance for at various points of those transactions. And I think they trailblazing in many ways, and we hope that many others will come to market. And we are always keen to discuss with potential issuers who are interested to come to market. There are various in the built environment space that we are already engaging, and it'll be including county governments, and it'll be interesting to bring some of those potential transactions to market so that the finance that is needed is channeled to the projects that actually need the capital. The other one I can mention without mentioning names is a bespoke property fund that we are helping to develop a very targeted ESG strategy for their investments, the property investments into that fund. And they're also seeking to get GRESB assessment to be able to catalyze and to attract the kind of capital that is interested in that kind of a fund. So I think I'll stop there in the interest of time. I could go on and on. As I say, this is a topic close to us.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Marion. And some great examples of how funders can set the tone and push the metrics down the chain onto the rest of industry. Rosalind, would you say that ESG considerations currently affect the day-to-day lending activities of banks in Kenya? From a borrower perspective, are there any industries which are kind of particularly affected by that, by ESG considerations, or is there not much activity or activity across the board?
Yeah, thanks, Alex, and thanks to Kenya Green Building Society for having KBA here. Yes, indeed, it does affect our lending activities in terms of how we even look at the credit appraisal process. We have installed what we call environmental management system, and it enables us to understand the environmental and also the social risk posed by a particular borrower. And that informs our decision in terms of how we'll extend the specific credit to our borrower. And yes, there's usually an exclusion list that banks have. You could look at maybe the tobacco industry. Banks don't tend to lend to that specific industry. You'd look at also an entity such as gambling, casinos. You'd find banks would not lend to that specific industry. And KBA has an accessible finance initiative that is currently training banks into having that kind of framework in place to ensure that they are creating long-term value for the environment, society, and the economy. We've been able to train about 36,000 bank staff since 2015 to date, and we continue to evolve in terms of the trainings that we're deploying, depending on the trends that is currently there. So yes, we do. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. And then Reshma, final question to you. We've talked a lot about setting ESG parameters and it affecting lending decisions, as Rosalind just mentioned. Is there any sense of ongoing monitoring in terms of compliance with ESG principles that Equity Bank employs? And also, I would ask, what do you think is more effective for driving change? Would you say it's incentivization, the kind of carrot approach, or penalty and the stick approach?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So on the monitoring side, I'd say
Actually, let me start with the second question because it will really help me answer the first question. So, in terms of what is the incentive for it and stuff? When we started out, as you've probably heard from a lot of people, we've had a lot of international investors that have probably put a lot of ESG requirements, and probably the procedures started at that point. But when you look at our vision and our strategy, it was way beyond that in terms of it was integrated in terms of what Equity was doing. Our strategy itself, which is the Africa Recovery and Resilience Plan, has a pillar on social and economic transformation. That plan is not just equity, it's been adopted by the Commonwealth, by the East African community, etc. So when we talk about is it an incentive or what it is into how we measure our performance now going forward. Performance of the organization, which gets rolled down throughout the whole organization in itself. So yes, they are, in terms of our procedures, do provide some kind of penalties where we don't follow our own internal procedures. We do have to also report to our external advisors where we do not follow our own procedures, or where there are any defaults, or whether there are any dispensations that we want. So that provides a bit of a kind of a sticker carrot approach and reward. But in terms of what we do in terms of monitoring, ESG is looked at for us from a strategy perspective, but from a governance perspective as well. I have to report directly to our board in terms of where we are on sustainability, not just to the risk committee, but to the investment and strategy committee as well. In terms of how we monitor it, it goes across in terms of not just risk, but what are we doing in terms of opportunity as well. There's a lot of facilities that we generally tend to go out and actively seek because we want to encourage ESG. Those facilities require us to monitor what we're doing in terms of the ESG, not in terms of just compliance, but impact. And data becomes an extremely important one because it's very easy to measure the amount of money you're putting into something, but it's then measuring the impact of that is becoming an increasing requirement going forward. Yeah, I think I've within my time allocation.
No, brilliant. Thank you. And great example of how internal procedures can help drive change beyond the walls of an organization as well. Those were the kind of set questions that I had for the panel. I think it would be great to hear from the audience if we have any questions. I haven't asked for a technology-enabled session, so we'll be employing the traditional microphone method. Do we have any questions from the audience? Please, do we have microphones going around? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Ted Otieno, the chairperson at Kenya Green Building Society. I think the question I had is based on Rajna's comments. She said something about risk and opportunity. I think most of the time when we think about ESG, we think about risk. So I'd like the panelists to tell us about more on the opportunities.
Thank you very much. Does anyone want to speak to the opportunities around ESG?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. So one of the big things of, especially on my role, what I've been trying to do is get the thinking within the organization and changing our procedures to actually start looking at where the risks are and what can we then do as a financial institution to go in and change that. So one key one we've been working at the moment is around food and agriculture, and specifically around climate adaptation. So we're working with the DFI at the moment in terms of determining the taxonomy, in terms of what is eligible for climate adaptation, and then what is the criteria for funding, and then getting funding from them to help us de-risk, and especially going to some of the smaller farmers that might have been too risky for an organization. So that's one key opportunity. Another opportunities that we're working with is around looking at the energy sources of some of our clients. One of the big ones we found was especially around government institutions, schools. 1 million trees cut just to provide energy, and working with them in terms of getting alternative energy sources and working with partners who can provide that and us provide the funding so that changes the energy source. So those are like two examples. On the governance side, one of the key projects that I'm currently working on is working with artisanal miners to try and bring a bit more structure around them, to bring them out of the informal into the formal sector, so they actually have financial training, have eligibility for financing. So that provides a few examples on some of the opportunities. Anybody else?
And I'd like to add, from a business and strategy perspective, there's documented evidence that including energy efficiency measures and renewable energy can bring down costs of operations by about 30%, just for even SMEs. So bringing down costs is one. Then there's improved business and operational efficiencies, just because you're thinking through all your processes and methods, whether it's your factories or warehouses or your manufacturing machines. What you do is end to end, you know what the process is and how can you kind of minimize the wastage. So that's why we see that the companies which are best in class and are able to perform well, they're doing well on ESG impact parameters just because they have those operational efficiencies. But it goes both ways. Once you start thinking about it, you can improve the operational efficiencies.
Yeah, it seems we all want to say something, because it's spot on. Really, opportunities are much more, there are many opportunities actually on this journey, and as compared to, it's good to look at the risks, and it's good from a governance perspective just to track that. But I think opportunities open up a new world of possibilities for institutions and organizations. And just at the back of what he said about operational efficiency and cost savings, when I look at the ESG agenda, actually, it does create that more, not only more business, but also operational efficiency. And just using an example of what ABSA has recently done, in line with walking the talk, one of the things we've done is to retrofit all our buildings. We have almost 88 buildings across the country, and they've all been retrofitted to green. And what we've seen in terms of cost saves is really good business. And so it does create that operational efficiency and cost save, but more than that, it also enables you to look at to adopt to innovations. When we look at green, there's a lot of innovations coming in, and the only way you will be able to get into some of that space is bringing in partnerships and bringing in other stakeholders, because it has to be collaborative effort. And if I look at it from a financial services perspective, we will not stop looking at risks, whether we are looking at financial inclusivity in terms of green business, or looking at youth and startups, or looking at women. There are nuances that we have to be alive to, but when you bring in partners to work with, then those nuances are much more reduced if it's from a risk perspective. And that enables you to adopt into innovation and be able to fund those, because those will scale really the ESG agenda. And also looking at the groups of people who have been excluded. I think for me, women and startups, and as a bank, we really do know that there's a big opportunity in that space. And just by looking at what are the challenges women and youth are facing, how are we able to bring in partners like the Africa Guarantee Fund, who then come to de-risk the youth up to 75%, green businesses up to 75%, SMEs up to 50%. That allows us to be able to scale and be able to really tap into those opportunities. So really, it is good for business, because we have to remember that as we look at people and planet, it's essential for the organization to make profit, because then it is not sustainable if you don't balance all the three.
I could add just on the issue of, especially on the environmental aspect, So of course, I mean, there'll be new technologies, build technology and the rest. And even if you look beyond buildings, even in the manufacturing space, I think all that falls within the built environment to some extent. And so that new technology, new ways of doing things also builds an opportunity for even job creation. Because I think there's sometimes a fear that with this transition discussions, there's a risk that there are those who will lose out. I think it's about reskilling, and I think there will be a whole lot of opportunities for other people who are trained specifically to deal with that, part of the environmental sustainability side of things. And I think even new players in our market that we will see. I think what I can mention for us as FSD Africa, we see that building sustainably will continue to be very important, whether it is housing, infrastructure, various projects. And one of the things we are doing with other partners is to support development of a very Kenya-specific guarantee credit enhancement facility to provide 100% guarantees for potential bond or infrastructure debt borrowing for these kind of transactions or these kind of projects. And I think that will de-risk to an extent. It's an opportunity, and it also helps to catalyze more capital to some of those projects, which sometimes investors may feel are risky, but that's one of the things that we are doing in that space.
Just to add on to what they have shared, it does attract sophisticated investors. Equity recently attracted IFC in terms of giving them some credit line. So it does bolster the ability to be seen in a more reputable way. So in short, yes, there are lots of opportunities.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes, I'm quite excited that we've had SMEs being mentioned, and Laikipia County is really passionate about SMEs. We are supporting about 1,300 enterprises, and we have partnered with some banks, and they have availed about 3 billion, and Laikipia County is paying 6% of the interest, whereas the enterprise is paying 7%. That sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, it's clap. So that sounds good, but the amount that has actually gotten to the SME is about 20 million of the 3 billion. And two things. Number one, credit rating. So conventionally, SMEs would not make it as a viable business to finance. So it's a challenge to the financiers to try and see, because you have this welder, you have this guy who's making, specific material from sustainable material, and they need financing. And could the financiers look at the credit rating and see how can this, if it's a bankable business idea, then finance it. That's number one. Number two would be asset financing. So typically for a financier, you'd want to finance probably a tractor or a pickup. But this guy needs a specific machine to make wheelbarrows or whatever, or jikos. And banks will be like, oh, no, that is not in our list of asset financing. So it's a challenge to the financiers to be broad and to be open to all these things and actually move forward and finance these SMEs. Thank you.
Do any of the panelists want to speak to how you can unlock financing for SMEs in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to take that. KBA does have a program called the Inuka Enterprise Program. It's a capacity building program where we de-risk SMEs to enhance their capacity to access bank finance. We partnered with Equity Bank. We're able to deploy about 3.4 billion Kenya shillings to SMEs as a result of that de-risking capacity building program. So it's something that we're working on. Thank you.
In addition to those programs, Equity through the Equity Group Foundation also has a financial inclusivity training that we put a lot of SMEs through. And the idea for that is to get them, again, to understand how to get into the financial sector and help them build a business case and things. And it's specifically focused on SMEs. We also look for specific finding around MSMEs, de-risking profiles, risk guarantee sharings that allow this. And as part of what we're doing, especially with the Africa Recovery and Resilience Plan, we're also trying to bring kind of associations together. So your example of like spare parts, etc., you can finance an asset, but then what happens around maintenance and things like that as well, which becomes, so we're trying to work with international organizations to bring in some of those models that can help SMEs manage that side of things. So what we're trying to do is look at the broader ecosystem and say how can, and the other thing that we are trying to do, and we call it our ecosystem banking, is look at what is the supply chain, what is the value chain of that MSME, and can we use that anchor client that they're working with to kind of de-risk that SME or use that kind of risk rating. The other element is also what we're doing is we're looking at algorithms that we can introduce as well to try and make it a faster process in terms of going through the risk scoring, maybe different types of loan, shorter terms, etc., and other models for de-risking. So there's quite a lot of focus on the MSME side, and also given that when you look at that, it is probably the biggest contributor of employment in any country, and therefore has to be one that we really need to look at, and not just the large corporates.
Yeah, so just to add to that, we've seen that we are an enterprise support organization. We run a lot of accelerators as well for SME support. So end-to-end, adding the credit enhancement support, but there's a lot of opportunity for technical assistance and capacity building as well. And what we do is we also organize investor pitches. So we have a large network of impact investors and DFIs. So once we take the SMEs through the accelerator program, end to end, we conduct a needs assessment, we understand what their challenges and pain points are, we design a curriculum which addresses those pain points, and then we take the SMEs through that journey where we also refine their pitches for impact investors, and then we're able to kind of take them to fundraise and funding. So, and as Reshma said, we also use technology to deliver this virtually, as well as we check on the important parameters where they need those kind of assistance.
And I think without having to repeat what has already been said, I think there's also a role of digital lending in all this, because sometimes we really want to serve clients through brick and mortar, and sometimes digital lending actually opens up an opportunity to be able to lend more into those sectors. And I think what we have been doing is also to increase those limits. So we're just not lending to you 3,000 shillings. It's actual money that can help you in terms of business. But I think something which was mentioned about just looking at the entire ecosystem. So if I'd call that a small manufacturer is looking at who are the off-takers and how do you then also support the off-takers, so you ensure that this one client is looked at holistically and the entire ecosystem is supported to be able to ensure that the business actually will survive and will run. And I think lastly, it's looking at more flexible ways of reviewing some of these clients. So in the traditional banking system, you'd say, I have to see your statements, I think, for 1 year. And we've moved away from that. Now we are using M-Pesa statements to say we can't be able to look at viability of lending to you just through those statements, using algorithms as already mentioned, and also bringing in partners. And there are a lot of development partners who are very keen on green and youth and startups. And I think a lot of these young people have great innovations, a lot of potential. They just need support. And I think we as ABSA have moved into that space and really looking at how we can unlock that potential. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you very much. How are we doing for time? We've got time for 2 more questions. Okay, please, 2 more minutes. Okay, 1 minute each. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Just in relation to what Chris asked, and also with what you are finishing with, I mean, for ESG requirements, they can be really onerous for you to file the paperwork and do all this documentation. It could be slightly easier for a Safaricom, a bigger company, but then how are we thinking around making it easier for the SMEs and the smaller companies and the local companies that want to embrace ESG, but they just look at all that onerous reporting requirement and they need a new department just for filing the paperwork? What are we doing to help them on that side?
Maybe I'll just make some quick comments and allow the other panelists. I think when I look at it, actually, smaller organizations have it easier in terms of embedding ESG into the process, because when you look at a bigger corporate which has complex systems, it becomes much more difficult. And I think this is where capacity building comes in. You just need to help SMEs understand, and then once it's integrated as part of your business, it's not something we do at the peripheral. It's actually at the core of what you do every day as a business. And I think it's just to support them through the journey, first to understand, but also demystify it. I think it's very when you talk about green buildings, one of the people made a joke and told me they were doing it was a media company, and they went around asking people what green buildings means, and most of the answers came. There are 2 green buildings in Kenya: Afia House and Greenhouse on Gog Road. And we just need to demystify, because green buildings is actually very simple. It's just that people don't understand what it actually means. So we need to demystify this whole language that makes it look like it's very complex, because it's not. It is part of what you do on a day-to-day basis. It's the lens at which you look at it. So I think capacity building is one of them, just to help SMEs to understand, but also the transition. And I think transition financing is really going to be big for Africa, because we have to realize that we have to walk the journey. As financial institutions, we can't pull a plug and say, we won't fund this sector or that sector. If we have a decent plan, which an organization is looking into, I think it's to appreciate that it takes time. It's been said here, it's a journey, it's not a destination. So just also being able to acknowledge that and be willing to work with clients through the journey.
Sure, and thanks. Just to answer your question, the 3 most impactful ways to embed ESG, one would be, of course, you're offsetting the costs by becoming operationally more efficient. Secondly, what you're doing is, if you're, as an SME, you're scoring your assets. We heard Gress mentioned earlier, but if you use ESG scoring to score your assets, you're able to attract long-term patient capital at a lower interest. So, and the third one is you can generate additional income from carbon credits. So one, you're improving your efficiency. Second, you're attracting long-term patient capital at lower interest rate. And third, you're generating an additional revenue stream. So these 3 ways can be very helpful to kind of strategically think about how to expand ESG adoption. And SMEs don't have to, they're not listed yet, so they don't fall under the mandatory reporting yet. But if they're planning for that journey, if they're planning for that growth, then strategically thinking about this is helpful to grow.
Reshma, I think you wanted to add
Yeah,
as well.
just 2 practical things that we've introduced specifically to deal with that. Number one, we don't treat every company in the same way, so we have to look at the risk profile. So for SMEs, most of them, we have a simplified ENS assessment to assist with that. Second thing is we try and walk away from just it being about documentation. So we don't have an army of ESG team who sits in head office or completely doesn't understand the client, who goes out and does the assessment. The assessments are done by our relationship managers. So they go out, they sit down with the client, they get to understand the client, they work with the client to understand the risk and the opportunities, and then it makes it easy for those SMEs to understand how to be compliant, but also where the opportunities are for them for all the things that we've just talked about. So those are the 2 practical things that we've introduced to help with that.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm very conscious of my obligation to keep time because I've just been reminded of it. I think if we wrap up the session there, this is obviously a massive conversation, and this is a fantastic forum. Thank you, Nazra, for continuing the conversation. I think the panelists will be around afterwards for further questions, but if everybody could join me in giving them a huge round of applause. So thank you very much. Yes, you are dismissed.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Those were insightful discussions. I guess as a comment and a suggestion, probably to the investors and financiers in the room, one of the things that we would propose as KGBS, as the ecosystem enabler in the room, is that if we do want ESG to be taken seriously, we want your help by making it one of your mandatory requirements when you give funding, because you have the money. Everyone flows where the money goes, and if you do it, then I think everyone starts complying. On that note, thank you so much for your time, and I'd just like to invite Gikonyo once again. I understand he has a speech he has to deliver, so please give him a round of applause. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nazra, and thank you very much for your indulgence. I came up walking with a piece of paper because somebody printed it out for me. Although I got the email, maybe I should have been compliant to come with my iPad and not the printed paper. Earlier on, when I gave the speech on behalf of KEPSA CEO, I was actually just trying to fill the gap. Because I hadn't got the speech. But you must admit that I have proved that it's true that men can also multitask, because I stood up and I was thinking while on my feet. So at least we can give a clap to me. So not that I am a con, but let me just read this speech. It's long, but I will not, I'll jump to it. Now, for purposes of governance, I'm trying to make sure that, and I hope the camera is on to show that I actually read the CEO's speech. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. I hold brief for the KEPSA CEO, Ms. Carol Kariuki, who is currently attending the 14th US Africa Business Summit in Morocco, and sends her regards to this distinguished meeting. Ms. Kariuki heads KEPSA, which is the apex body of the private sector in Kenya, to drive economic development through improvements in the year of business environment by addressing cross-cutting business issues, driving investment, and addressing socio-economic issues with partners. It brings together business associations and corporate bodies, both large SMEs and startups, to speak in one voice and working closely with government and other stakeholders in structured public-private dialogue platforms and other engagement mechanisms. I'd already said that, just remember. One of the key engagement platforms at KEPSA is private-private dialogue, where we engage the three arms of government on policy and legislative reform to spur business. We roundtable meetings with the executive, parliament, and the judiciary. The Chief Justice Roundtable has spurred a partnership with KGBS on training of judges of the Environment and Land Court on emerging areas of land and environmental law. As KEPSA, we are truly grateful for the cordial partnership and look forward to actualizing the same through the KEPSA Lands and Physical Planning Sector Board, which I chair. Now, on to what has brought us here today, ESG. In this age of sustainable development goals, we must rethink approaches to sustainable value creation and a clear framework to structure sustainable efforts. Environmental, social, and governance is an emerging trend in the latest efforts in achieving sustainability goals. Businesses, which is who KEPSA speaks for, are not left behind in this cause. They must drive business growth while building a more sustainable, equitable, and ethical future. The environmental element of ESG evaluates what a company business does to ensure that it operates sustainability, including its action on climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and water usage. It places focus on carbon footprint and environmental impact. The social element of ESG, on the other hand, examines how companies, businesses manage their relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, and the customers and the communities they operate within. It also advocates for diversity, equity, and inclusivity. Lastly, the governance element of ESG deals with how an entity is governed, but includes but not limited to a company's leadership, internal controls, anti-corruption measures, tax transparency, and the way that decisions are made across the executive board. This aspect aids business in establishing their strengths in a competitive environment by giving them a cutting edge above competitors. So why is ESG important for businesses? Incorporation of ESG standards in companies, entities, and corporations alike is becoming vital because it aids in understanding stakeholders, consumers, and thus meeting the expectations, which in turn enhance business performance. It promotes sustainability, making business and investments more profitable in the long run. Number 3, it attracts new consumers and investors. 4, it aids in measuring, anticipating, preventing, and mitigating risks. It helps to build brand equity. And finally, it aids in expanding opportunities, thus promoting overall economic growth. With regard to the relevance to the built environment, land, physical planning, housing, urban development, and real estate, we've talked a lot about that, so I won't go further to talk about that, but we've seen various initiatives in the finance sector, regulators like the CMA, the CBK, which are pushing for ESG compliance to be compulsory. So, and the rest of the speech will be posted and circulated. I think that it's very long. I do not want to read it. All I'll just conclude is to say it is therefore clear that the incorporation of ESG in matters relating to land, physical planning, housing, real estate, urban development, and the built environment is key to creating sustainable projects and programs that have the ability to maintain or improve the environment and also improve the quality of life of residents by creating sustainable living patterns. It's also attractive from an investor point of view as it encourages efficient operations and competitiveness, thus in turn promoting economic growth. Thank you. Sasa ile bien, you don't need to go off to the cuff. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, VG, Mr. Gikonyo. I appreciate it. I just wanted to remind the second panel, just like the first panel, we'll be taking panel pictures post the event, so please stay. Up next, I'd like to invite our chair for me to make concluding remarks. Ted, thank you.
Good, what time is it? Oh, still morning. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, so my name is Ted Otieno. I'm the chairperson at Kenya Green Building Society. I think Nazwa must have mentioned what Kenya Green Building Society does, but for me, before I give the closing remarks, I'd like to let you know what our key resources are at Kenya Green Building, because we can't do this alone. Nazwa can't do it alone. I can't do it alone. The first is our premium members. So ABSA, you saw Jane Wayaki here. We also have Majid Al Futain. Those are our key resources. We also have members in the room. I think my members, maybe they can wave at me. I can see some. And I'd encourage each and every one of you to be a member of Kenya Green Building Society. And then our board. So maybe I'll ask them to actually come here so that you can see them. I don't know if they were. I'd like you to see the rest of the board. So please. Yeah, so I think it's important for you to know our key resource as a board, from a board and governance perspective. So you can see we definitely are, I would say, looking at the S and the G. You would see that in our board. I'd like for you all to do that on your boards. So we'll start with I mean, maybe you can give them a mic and they can introduce themselves so you can know that they speak as well. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Wangari Rushiri. I'm a board member and I'm also the Assistant Secretary of the board.
Good morning, all. Good morning. My name is Roy Githaiga. I'm a board member.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rashad. I'm the board treasurer, and I've been involved with the board for, I think, almost 8 years now.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Asmina Banji, and I'm vice chair of the Kenya Green Building Society.
Morning, everyone. I'm Claire Mzirai, and I am extremely excited to be part of the board, especially today. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rita Gisheru. I'm a board member representing National Construction Authority.
Morning, everyone. My name is Gurmukh Panesa. I'm a board member and have my own architecture practice in Nairobi.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Kimanga, and my second hat is a board member at KGBS.
Yeah, so as you can see, we've tried to drag in government, national construction, and a lot of private sector in our board, and the young people, which I also represent, so as chair as well. So, this is what we would like you guys to do. I think it's an opportunity for us. It has enabled us to convene such events. Then finally, I'd like to also let you see our secretariat does all of the heavy lifting, led by Nazra. So I'd ask the secretariat in the room to come and introduce themselves. We have a very lean but very tough secretariat. I think they represent us very well. And
good morning, everyone. My name is Rachel Mudel. I am a project manager and part of the secretariat team at KGBS. It's lovely to meet you all.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul. I am the KGBS admin.
Morning, everyone. My name is Louis Karifi. I work at the secretariat as the monitoring and evaluation officer. Nice to see you all.
Yeah, and Nazra, maybe you can, please, I guess just go just for formality's sake.
So are you still saying a few things?
Yeah, I need to finish this.
Great.
Yeah.
So I just needed to make sure, since you said you can close it, so I was a little confused. Hi everyone, my name is Nasra. Once again, I'm the CEO and ESG lead. I'm really happy that this has been a day full of very important and exciting conversations. I'd like to thank everyone from the KGBS team who's come today to support. From Ted to Asmina, Amrish, Roy, Claire, Gurmukh, and of course my superstars before you here. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ted. I'll let you make your speech and then I can say thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so I think what's been very clear, we said there's ESG gaps, but just from listening to the panelists, we can all agree that we have all the answers in the room. It's just a matter of collaboration. So what are the next steps? I think there's something that's been mentioned. Kenya is Africa's climate change champions. How many people knew that? Right? So there's a lot of things that Kenyans are known for. We're known for running. But what that means is that if we're Africa's climate change champions, it's not Kenya, the country, it's you, right? You're the climate change champion of Africa. So when people meet you and you're from Kenya, the first thing they should know is that, wow, you guys, on climate change, you've got it figured out. So, that could even just mean when you come off a matatu, you're like, oh, my carbon footprint today is so high. Maybe I need to stay at home and work remotely, So that's, I should send an email to Jane and she says, today I can't meet you physically, my carbon footprint, I'm watching it, right? It should go, that's exactly what we need as Africa's climate change champion. So don't think about it as Kenya, as somebody, as the government. Think about it as you. What are you doing now that you're Africa's climate change champion? So that we don't say Africa has a problem with climate change, and yet you yourself haven't, had an impact on that. So what is the next steps, right? First, come up with an action plan. Right, so together in the room, we're going to walk through our CEO and our secretary to come up with an action plan after this. This is a one-day event, right? What happens post-event is what's important. The second is to work on a sort of manifesto. So what are the key action items that we think that we can achieve, and what are the timelines for that? So what is KGBS committing to do? What is, as a society? First, we're committing to undertake, free edge awareness and edge assessment for any of the organizations in the room. So for anybody who wants an ESG awareness session done for their organization, or for a stakeholder that you think will benefit from it, we're willing to do that at our own cost. Then for real estate developers, for the first 10 organizations, we are willing to give you a free edge clinic. What that means is that we'll run your portfolio just as we did for ABSA, our premium member, through Edge to tell you where your buildings lie and what you can do to get them to be green. Again, Jane mentioned something I think always when we say Kenya Green Building, sometimes I wish we said Kenya Sustainable Building Society, because nobody wants to build unsustainably. So I think it's the norm. No one wants to do business unsustainably. No one wants to build unsustainably. But maybe when we throw in green there, people look at it as the periphery. Then finally, we commit to working with you to implement the ESG action plan that we are going to come up with. We're also willing to work with you to invite you to our ESG workshop and calendar that will be sent post-event. I think majorly what I would like to say is that we're willing to partner and collaborate. We're a membership-based society. We're non-profit. Our board actually is a volunteer board. So we really rely on partnerships, and it's partnerships like this that make things happen. So from me, thank you. Thanks for everyone in the room. I really enjoyed the conversations. They were very enlightening. Thank you.
I think we have come to the tail end of today's discussion. So just to recap what was said this morning, we brought you here because we all believe you're leaders in your organizations, profit, non-profit, in any capacity. And we're willing to work with you on this journey because we have an amazing opportunity before us. I wish I could scream it out for you, but I'd rather walk the journey with you instead. So in terms of our intended outcomes for today, 1, I'm hoping in the very least we have friends in the room that we can call and talk to discuss things that shape industries, to discuss things that move the needle. However, I'd prefer, above than that, having strategic partnerships that push our agenda forward. And we're more than willing to take that seat with you and discuss what that would look like post-event. Third, as Ted pointed out, to get the ball rolling, we've made some commitments to you today because we want to show you that on our end, we're ready to start that conversation by doing the actions and then asking you to join on board. So it's not just a talk, we're walking the walk with you. Fourth, on the action plan, once I share the draft with you all, I'd be grateful if you could internally come up with comments and also suggestions on potentially doing it better, differently, because together then we have a better and more solid document. So if you are interested in being part of this journey, and by virtue of this room I think you are, please, I'd be grateful if you respond once I share the draft, because we need to take theory into action. Fifth, I want to express with a lot of happiness that during these conversations, 2 organizations have already told me that actually 3 have told me they're interested. So as a start, we're talking with our friends in Telecap on awareness sessions on ESG, and we're also in talks with our friends, the Kenya Property Developers Association, to talk about what we can do with ESG. And separately, Bowmans have also communicated that they would want to have conversations. So I'm asking you guys to let us know, because we are really serious about pushing this agenda. And we would want it to be everyone in this room and everyone watching as well. So that's really important. And lastly, I'd like to start off by thanking our sponsors again. Kangwana in association with Clyde & Co. Thank you so much for all the support. You are our friends, you are our partners, you are supporters. I can't thank you enough for standing with us. Separately, I would also like to thank EY, again, who are our friends, partners and supporters. Unfortunately, both Frank and Anthony couldn't make it because they both, Frank was out of the country and unfortunately Anthony fell sick, but they are with us and stand with us and are going to work with us. I'd also want to really thank the ACON team, who are premium members and very, very strong ESG supporting partners. Thank you, Steve. Thank you to Sheila. Both have been really, really amazing sounding boards in these discussions. Our premium members, Majid Al Futtaim, our implementing partner, IFC, who unfortunately also could not be with us, but have really, really expressed excitement about this journey. And lastly, our friends at the Architectural Association of Kenya, who've really come through for us. And I'm really grateful that it's actually a built environment driver who's really come through with this, because for us, of course, our entry point is the built environment, but we appreciate that everyone here in the room is equally important. In terms of our strategic partners, there's so many, so forgive me if I forget anyone. I'll start off with event support. ABSA, thank you so much for being our day ones. We appreciate you, we love you, and we continue to hope that we will work on this journey stronger. ALP, Africa Logistics Properties, thank you so much. We love you, we appreciate you, and we look forward to working on this next phase of your journey together. Jersey Finance, I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am that we met you at the Nairobi Roadshow, and it's been an amazing experience ever since. We thank you so much for your kindness and hospitality. IntelliCap, thank you so much, Utsav and the rest of the IntelliCap team, for being a good sounding board for this event. We appreciate it. Safaricom, Owen and the rest of the team there, thank you so much for being present, and we really appreciate your insights, and we look forward to continuing our collaboration post this event. When we move on to our industry partners, industry and supportive partners, I'll start off with the Kenya Renewable Energy Association, who expressed apologies that they could not be present, but have been screaming in support behind the sidelines. Thank you so much. I'd also like to express our thanks to the Kenya Pension Funds Investment Consortium, KEPFIC, who have been such good friends to us, and we look forward to taking that conversation forward. Of course, KPDA, Mr. Gikonyo Gitonga, VG, as we lovingly call him, thank you so much for bullying the audience, the panelists as well. You got to do what I couldn't do, so thank you so much for that. But all in all, thank you so much for coming through in different hats, both from KPDA and KEPSA. We appreciate you. For the Women in Real Estate team, thank you so much, Robin. We really appreciate your support. You've been friends for so long, and we look forward to building stronger relationships as we go forward. KEPSA, thank you so much for coming through. We appreciate your presence. ESAC, thank you. George, I'm grateful for your participation and your contribution, and you've been such a sport. I really appreciate it. GRESB, which is the ESG reporting tool and benchmark for the built environment, who have been supportive throughout our ESG journey and will now play such a huge role as we transition into implementing ESG. Thank you. The Kenya Bankers Association, Roslyn, thank you so much. We appreciate your contribution today. We are grateful. Kara, we appreciate your presence in the room, and we look forward to working with you post-event, because we appreciate that it is not just businesses who build better societies, but also residential associations. So for that, thank you so much. IQSK, thank you so much for being such a sport and participating in the panel and being such good friends. ISK, thank you so much for your presence. I appreciate you. The World Green Building Council and the Africa Regional Network, who've been supportive throughout this journey as well, and are actually working with us on something that will be one of the outcomes of this conversation, which is taking the conversation to the regional aspect as we push the sustainability agenda. As chairs of the World Green Building Council for the Africa Regional Network, Kenya Green Building Society is really proud that our ESG conversation has going to have a lot of impact. We have that position on the Africa region, so it's important for us to maximize this on a local capacity. And lastly, I think to all the panelists who've agreed to take me on with my request, whether it was last minute, whether it was additional information that I needed, thank you so much. You were really good sports. Unfortunately, I I could not be present for a lot of the discussions at points in time, but I'd like to say a special thank you to Mary Njuguna from FSD Africa. I'd also like to express my thank you to Reshma Shah from Equity Bank. Thank you so much for that. I'd like to express my thank you to the first panel discussion. Unfortunately, my notes are just switched off, so I can't even see. But all in all, I'd like to say thank you to every single person in this room. I am really grateful, and I'm hoping then together we can really, really win this. So after this, please pick my calls, return my emails, and of course, let's close those conversations into action points. Asante Sana for panel 1 and 2, key speakers and KGBS board members and secretariat. I'll need you to stay behind for a few minutes as we take pictures. For the rest of everyone, we'll be sharing the pictures online. But thank you so much and have a lovely day and a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much.